Josh had always believed that a man's home was his sanctuary, a place of peace, stability, and control in a world that often felt like it was spiraling out of order. But that illusion shattered the morning he stepped outside and found his hedge, his perfectly trimmed, painstakingly nurtured hedge, completely flattened. The branches, once vibrant and strong, were reduced to a tangled mess of crushed leaves and broken twigs. The soil, where he had spent hours digging, planting, and tending, had deep tire marks, as if someone had deliberately plowed right through it without a second thought. Josh clenched his fists, his breath slow and steady, but his heart hammered against his ribs. This wasn't an accident. This was personal. Love seeing entitled people get what they deserve. Subscribe for more crazy stories like this. At first, he thought maybe it was some reckless driver, maybe a delivery truck that had miscalculated a turn. But deep down, he already knew the truth. It wasn't random. This was the fourth time in 2 weeks. He squatted down, running his fingers along the tire tracks, noting the pattern, the weight distribution. Heavy vehicle, SUV, maybe even a truck. The kind of vehicle that didn't just clip a hedge. No! Whoever did this had gone out of their way to make sure it was utterly destroyed. And then he spotted it. A small, shattered fragment of plastic nestled between the broken branches. A piece of a headlight casing. They messed up. Josh stood, his jaw tightening. He knew exactly who was behind this. Karen Douglas, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, a woman who had made it her personal mission to dictate how the entire neighborhood should look, down to the shade of mulch in people's yards. She had already tried to get Josh to remove his hedge before, claiming it was too tall and didn't align with the community's aesthetics. But that hedge wasn't just decoration. It was a boundary, a line between his property and their rules. And now, she wasn't asking anymore. Josh wiped his hands on his jeans and exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. He had lived in this house for 15 years. He wasn't about to be bullied into submission by an HOA dictator with too much time on her hands. The real question was, what was her endgame? He walked back up to his porch, his mind racing. The HOA had been pushing for neighborhood improvements, a fancy term for forcing homeowners to comply with new policies that always seemed to favor a select few. He had ignored most of it, refusing to bend to their increasingly ridiculous demands. And now this, a direct attack on his property. Josh spent the next few days trying to catch her in the act. He adjusted his routine, waking up earlier, staying up later, watching from his porch with quiet determination. But Karen was careful. Every time it happened, she managed to do it when he wasn't looking, when he ran to the store, when he was under the car in his garage, even when he took his trash out for just 5 minutes. It was almost surgical, calculated. The other neighbors were no help. They either didn't want to get involved or were too afraid of HOA retaliation. Even old Mrs. Henderson across the street, who spent most of her time on her front porch, just shook her head. "They come at night," she said, lowering her voice as if someone might be listening. Quick, like they don't want to be seen. Josh's patience was wearing thin. He wasn't a man who sought conflict, but he also wasn't a man who backed down when he was being pushed. And then one night it finally happened. He had stepped inside for 2 minutes to grab a wrench from his workbench. Just 2 damn minutes. When he came back outside, he heard it. The distant growl of an engine, the low rumble of tires against pavement. Josh's eyes snapped to the road. And there it was, a black SUV creeping past his house. The moment it reached his driveway, the engine roared to life. And before Josh could even move, it swerved hard off the road, straight into his hedge. Branches snapped like bones under the weight of the vehicle, the deep grinding crunch of metal tearing through it filling the night air. The SUV didn't just clip it, it demolished it. And just as quickly as it had come, it was gone. The taillights vanished into the darkness. Josh stood frozen for a moment, his fists clenched so tightly his nails dug into his palms. That was it. No more waiting. No more playing nice. Karen had just made a huge mistake, and she was about to find out exactly what happens when you push the wrong man too far. Josh didn't sleep that night. He sat in his garage, hands gripping his coffee mug, staring at the piece of shattered plastic he had picked up from the wreckage. His Hedge was gone again, but this time he had something they didn't know he had. Evidence. Proof that it wasn't just some random act of vandalism. The SUV had left behind more than broken branches and deep tire marks. It had left a trail. He turned the plastic over in his hands, inspecting the edges. Custom casing. Reinforced material. This wasn't just any vehicle. It was a high-end SUV, the kind that someone with money and power would drive. And there was only one person in the neighborhood who fit that description. Karen Douglas. Josh had been patient. He had played defense. He had tried to catch them in the act, tried to reason, tried to find a way around this war they had dragged him into. But they weren't playing fair. They had waited until his back was turned. They had been deliberate. Now it was his turn. By morning, Josh had a plan. He spent the day reinforcing his property, but not in a way anyone could see. He didn't want them to know he was setting a trap. The wreckage of his Hedge was still there, a reminder of how far they were willing to go, but he wasn't going to clean it up just yet. Let them think they had won. Let them think he was defeated. He dug into the soil, planting steel rods deep beneath the surface, securing the base of what remained of the Hedge with heavy stones and hidden reinforcements. On the surface, it looked like a mess, but beneath, it was a fortress. That night, he didn't sit on the porch. He didn't watch from the windows. He didn't wait up with a flashlight, like some paranoid homeowner hoping to catch a teenager playing pranks. No, he went to bed, because when they came back, and they were going to learn a very expensive lesson. Sometime after midnight, they took the bait. Josh woke up to the unmistakable sound of metal screeching against something unmovable. A hard, sharp crunch followed by a dull thud. For a second, everything was silent. Then an engine sputtered, a door slammed, and muffled cursing cut through the quiet night. Josh took his time getting to the door. No need to rush. They weren't going anywhere. The moment he stepped onto his porch, he saw the black SUV sitting half buried in his Hedge. Well, what was left of it? The front end had folded inward. The hood crumpled like tin foil. One of the front tires had burst, and deep gouges in the paint showed exactly where the reinforced rods had done their job. And standing beside the wreck, clutching his wrist and seething with rage, was Karen's husband, Richard. Josh crossed his arms, tilting his head slightly. Having some trouble there? Richard whipped around, his face pale with fury. What the hell did you do? Josh took a slow step forward, letting the silence stretch between them. Looks like you hit something, Richard. He motioned toward the wrecked Hedge. Maybe you should be more careful where you drive. Richard's jaw clenched, his breathing heavy. He was trying to figure out how to turn this around, how to make it look like Josh was the problem, but he had nothing, because he knew he was caught. Josh glanced at the SUV again. The damage was extensive, far worse than just a busted headlight this time. Karen's little war had just cost them thousands, and Josh wasn't even close to done. The next day, he made a few calls. He had friends, people who worked in repair shops, people who knew how to find things out. And just as he expected, a black reinforced SUV had been brought in for repairs that morning. By Karen Douglas. Josh smiled. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. But what caught his attention wasn't the damage report. It was what the shop owner had casually mentioned during the call. Karen wasn't just some HOA busybody. She had connections. Developers, real estate moguls, city officials. People who had been pushing new projects through zoning approvals before homeowners even knew what was happening. And Josh's property? It was right in the middle of something big. This wasn't just about a Hedge. They wanted him gone. And if they were willing to go this far over a row of bushes, what would they do if he didn't back down? Josh set the phone down, his mind already racing through his next move. He had caught them in one act of destruction. That was just the start. Now, he needed to pull the whole thing apart. because Karen and her people had been playing games.